All right. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for watching. This is the first time doing the show, and stoked to have Mandalorian Genetics here, full duplex. We met about 6 months ago at Shango Los Vimea event, and out in the parking lot, and we were smoking some herb and started talking, and yeah, we've been hanging out a lot, and so stoked to have you, man. And also stoked to have Bam here from Stock and Bean, dude. We met a couple years back at the conference. You came out. It was pretty awesome, man, and started dropping some knowledge. And we've had a couple conversations here and there. And I wanted to bring this conversation together. You know, we wanted to interview you, Dan, and but I wanted to invite Bam along because we kind of share these mutual genetics, and Bam and I are both kind of learning about autoflower hemp specifically. And there's these seeds that I bought that I've shared with both you guys, and we have this common thing. And so I thought it would be a good way to talk about autoflowers and how to breed with autoflowers, because everyone's really hot on it, you know, ourselves included. So yeah, dude, just thanks so much again for being willing to share, you know, all your hard work, because that's like, you know, steps all of our game up big time. So mad respect to you for that, dude.
Well, I appreciate you having me, man. I really do. It's, you know, it's an honor to be among some of the best minds that I consider in the industry out here. You know, just autoflowers is, of course, it's, you know, becoming a big wave right now, but there's been a lot of work behind the scenes. And I think this is a good platform to really start incorporating it all. You know, talking about the hemp side, the regular autoflower side, and just getting a feel from what you guys are looking for, and maybe to shed some light on this stuff.
Yeah, it's an exciting time, and it's really amazing to be able to pick your brain. I'm excited, you know. Autoflowers are new to me. People, they've been around on the block for a long time, and I don't really have a good reason why I was like not about the autoflower movement. Maybe just fear of the unknown and never seeing fire autoflowers. But I have seen a lot of fire autoflower lately, and as I make my shift into like the hemp space, there seems to be a huge demand for it. And so it's a market factor that I need to be cognizant of. And it's really fun. And it's like as a breeder, it's exciting to delve down a whole new chapter of characteristics and traits. But yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation because I feel like there's so much that I could learn from your wisdom, because I'm in there. And, you know, the thing about wisdom is it's one thing to hear it. But then when you put it into practice, because you see it, it's like it's that Obi-Wan Kenobi in your brain that like pops up and was like, I told you so.
Yeah, you know, and it's good to have these conversations too, and to find the open-mindedness. You know, I mean, you said that, you know, you didn't have anything against them, and a lot of people that I have met, fortunately, have got the same approach to it. But there are also a lot of old school guys that are just like, nope, nothing new, and that's fine. You know, if it's not your thing and that doesn't pique your interest, then that's okay. But like you just said, it's started to come to light. And I think the reason it's come to light is because of all the years that guys like myself have really put into it to get it to this point, to show that it's not that ditch that it used to be.
Yeah.
So what were the I was just gonna say, what were the first? What was your first intro to auto, Dan? Like, what were your first fed of beans? Like, did you see somebody's weed, or how'd you, you know, where to start?
Where to start? So, a while back, it was several years ago, over a decade ago. You know, I was interested in growing my own medication. Wanted to make sure that, you know, I kept it low key, and autos seemed to fit that ticket for me under the little bit of research that was out there for them. And the very first set of seeds that I got were from Spain by a breeder by the name of Mossy. They were the purple gem, and you've probably heard the gem name. Anybody else out there listening, something that you guys are familiar with too. But I bought those seeds through Attitude Seed Bank and started figuring out what these guys were. I saw real quick the need for some medication. I had a family member that was suffering for colorectal cancer. And, you know, the the spot that I was in my life, it wasn't, readily available. It wasn't a place where this was actually seen as a medication. And so that's really how I got my hand on them. Quick turnaround time, low odor, and they yielded pretty decent back then. And I want to say I saw the potential back then. I saw something new that was different, something that had potential that nobody was willing to work with because it was kind of like the black sheep of the family. Yeah, they're cool and everything, but we're just going to kind of hold you out to the outside. And I saw a little bit more into that. And when I saw working with them and the terpenes and the medical aid, it was a no-brainer. It was one of those things where it's just like, okay, let's give something a shot. If it doesn't work out, it's not going to be that big a deal. But I mean, as we see today, they proved differently. So the very first cultivar that I ever had my hands on was Purple Gem, straight out of Spain. The genetic background on them is a ruderalis with some little bit of the Northern Lights. I forget what the original strain cross had, but that led me to meet the actual original breeder of those. And we have formed a relationship that we still speak to today. And I actually had the fortunate benefit, I've taken some of the stuff that I have received from Spain, either through her, a few other breeders over there, because they were way ahead of the auto wave than we were years ago. Like where we are at now stateside, EU is like there 7-8 years ago. They saw the potential early on. They really had a hand in it. And she shared some of the other cultivars that she had for me, and we counterparted and worked back and forth. And I actually had the pleasure of sending her back everything that I have made crosses from the original genetics like 10 years ago. So a lot of that stuff came from original ruderalis, Siberian landrace stuff, Russian stuff. Even some of the stuff was connected with Lowrider 2, which all has that in its background too. Lowrider 1, Lowrider 2 all came from that general region.
Were you right from the get, were you starting to make your own crosses, or was it like just kind of growing out, buying more seed packs for a while, or was it straight into breeding?
It was
like
actually
keeping the seeds going so you have more seed to plant the next time.
That's exactly what it was. It's like I wasn't comfortable ordering seed online, and I saw the potential, and I just said, you know what? At first, pollen check. Get that pollen out there and make myself a sustainable crop, and then figure it out from there. Let the genetics teach me. Let the plant teach me. And over the course of years, I learned the difference of adding in photoperiod or photosensitive cultivars to the auto world, and learned the simple basics of the Punnett square on how to actually do the breeding and what the math would attribute to. Once I started reading some fundamentals and applying it to not just cannabis, but pepper plants. Pepper plants were another way for me to not only test genetic diversity, but they grew similar to autoflowers under the same light schedule. They had the same soil demands. And I mean, we've heard that they're common to a tomato plant, and I agree 100%. If you can grow a tomato plant, you can grow an autoflower. But one underlooked thing that a lot of people don't realize is they're very similar to pepper plants in their growth schedules. Now, mind you, a pepper plant, same sex on the same plant. But when it comes to pollination and crossing, it basically laid it around the same lines. So I took the knowledge that I had from breeding peppers and moved it over to the autoflower world, and that's where I stood today.
Nice. So those first seeds that you got, they were regular, not feminized?
That's correct. I mean, that's back when regular autoflowers were on the market and non-feminized. And that's another good point that you bring up right there too. And one thing we'll keep on the back of, it's a little early for the discussion, but breeding against a regular autoflower and a feminized autoflower, what to watch out for.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to be aware of. Second question, to follow up to the first one was, can you describe what your setup was for that first grow, pots, environment, and what kind of yields and style of grow you did for that autoflower, especially being like your first time with the autoflower? Because that's one of the challenges that I'm finding. Like, cause I've been growing trees for years. It's different, and so having that, downloading that experience from you could be very insightful.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm sorry if I interrupt. I apologize. My environment was probably pretty much like what you were doing growing trees indoor. 8 high pressure sodium in a sealed cabinet, filtration system, keeping temperatures between 76 and 78 is where I typically like it. Growing in some hardwall nursery 1-gallon pots with some Walmart soil, man. A couple bottles of Fox Farm, and that was about it. I had to pretty much adapt to what I had available to me. And you are correct. I grow both photoperiods and I grow autos. I have to if I want to continue the diversity of my gene pool. But the one thing that I will say is they are a little different. That's a common question that I get from a lot of farmers out here that I've worked with. Not just being up there with Joshua, but coming across several people at Shango Los's meetings. I often warn them, it's like growing any other kind of cannabis. But at the same time, there is a little bit of difference to it because they don't like their root zones disturbed. You can take a photoperiod, trim her back, and cut her sides off and the bottom off every bit down to a small cube out of a 3-gallon pot, and she's going to return. You do that to the auto, it's just not going to do the same. It's not going to behave the same way. So a couple of things that I always, recommend at the beginning and learning is less is more. Get you a nice base soil. For the rookie grower or somebody at home, like Promix HP with Myco, and then add a little bit of earthworm casings, just a touch of blood meal, bone meal, your basic NPK ratios, and feed them water. Learn the mechanics of the plant because the mechanics are different, like we were talking earlier. You said, with one of the cultivars that we've both had working with, you notice that you see a lot of the mom or the dad, and they respond in a certain way. But then you look at that auto that you've had that's got the true clock, and it just kind of keeps pushing forward. It doesn't want to slow down. It doesn't want to stop. And I think if you want to grow with autos for the first time, make sure that the genetics have been worked. Stay away from the name game. There's a lot of people out right now that are taking cookies and stuff and saying, oh, we got an auto cookie. It's just the math doesn't work out for the time they're turning it around. So make sure your cultivars, and I'm not even trying to promote my own stuff, because there's a lot of guys out there right now that have fantastic auto genes. Just make sure you get that if you really want to try successfully your first time. Stay away from that hype and find out who your tried and true guys are.
On your first run, what were the yields like in that room from the auto?
My first yield, I would say, I grew in a 1-gallon hardwall pot, and I would say barely over an ounce. You know what I mean?
Per plant, how many plants per light?
So in my original space was probably a 4 foot, 3 foot by 4 foot. And, you could put, close to 10 1-gallon pots in there with a little bit of room. So there's no crowding. So you look at 10 ounces, maybe somewhere between 9 and 10. And nowadays you get 10 ounces off of one plant.
That was going to be my follow-up question. How far have you taken it?
Yeah. And I'll toot my whistle a little bit. I've got some guys that have run my stuff in deep water culture, seed pound and a quarter, dry plant material, dry flower that they've actually produced.
That was going to be one of my questions, because I've heard, you've talked about this to me, that the trigger mechanism for autos is often when the roots get bound or they hit a some sort of wall. And so in a hydroponics scene, they got it forever,
They've got all the time in the world. And, a lot of it does. I think there's a happy medium between maturity and, root restriction, and the reason I feel that way is because you get them in a small pot. I can take the same cultivar that I've worked up to F6, put it in a solo cup, and it will flower faster than one that's in a 2-gallon cloth pot, because those roots are being air pruned in that 2-gallon. And when they get inside that solo cup, well, they go out, down, and it's game over. It's time to trigger. And that's when you start dealing with your maybe 2-foot plant if you get lucky on a stretch and you got your lights are super high. Light intensity is key too, gentlemen. That's one thing I've learned with autos. If you want them to yield heavy and you want them to yield well, light intensity seems to be one of the big tickets on that item. I saw that increase exponentially after I dropped from a 250 watt HPS just up to a 400 or even a 315 ceramic metal halide. I could see monumental yield increases just from that pure intensity. And that's why I caution a lot of guys, specifically on farms that are growing outdoors. If you're growing less than 15 hours, you need supplemental light in there. You need to make sure that they can get at least 16, 17 hours. I prefer 18, But anything under 15, they start struggling for yield. They'll get real foxtaily, they get real airy, they just get real, just shit quality.
That explains a lot, because I'm growing them under the current natural light schedule, really, which is probably closer to 11 to 10 and a half hours.
Yeah. And they'll start to suffer, and that's probably what you're seeing.
But you said about the roots, that hasn't been my, I mean, I haven't finished the round. Again, this is my first round. But what's interesting is that I popped a ton of seeds this year, and it's a man and wife operation. So a lot of the seeds stayed in like the plugs longer than would be considered ideal. And I'd heard this wisdom that once they get bound, it's something that you want to avoid. But there's a lot of things that were like, they were left in there long, and they kind of stunted out in the plug. But now that I've transplanted them, they're surprisingly back. And,
yeah, they'll
and
take
on from like this to, like that pretty rapidly. And they didn't really start showing sex until they got to like this, even though they were probably already at like day 12 and day 14, and running and seeing those same varieties that I had put into the same varieties that were transplanted earlier, seeing their development next to them. It's almost like in this root bound situation, it held off the instinct to flower.
Now were these on the hemp cultivars that we were talking about earlier, or was this on the autopilot?
This was specifically on the autopilot and the Czech Mongolian. Both of those exhibited this.
And the reason that I asked that is, one of the things we were talking about earlier, sometimes they get stuck. And I think maybe what you might have been experiencing there is because, with me growing out the several that I have here, I noticed that there are still a lot of phototendencies in that plant. And I'm wondering if that could be playing into it. And I'm wondering if the plants that are fully, day neutral dominant from the ruderalis trait have that sensitivity to the root zone. Maybe because of the fact that those Mongolian and Czech I'm not, like we've talked about earlier, I'm not sure about the autopilot's ancestry. But if there's maybe a little bit of that photo period in there, it kind of behaves the same way. It's just like, or in my mental is like a transplant on a photo, like we were talking about. If you take one out of a small pot, cut the roots back, and then it continues to grow because you give it back that room again. So it could have stalled it. And I have seen that on some of my cultivars where ProMix HP, for example, is completely inert. There's no beneficial activity in there as far as an NPK ratio other than the microhyzae. And I have seen them to where I watered it and they stopped at about, the first true leaf set. They're starting to put on the second true leaves, and then they just quit doing anything. And then I figured out the ProMix was inert, started feeding some, synthetic nutrients into that, and it took back off into a decent sized plant, 2.5, 3 foot tall once it's done flowering. So I think there could be some variation to that. I'm not dead set on that's the ideal trigger. I just think it could be remnants of, photosensitive cannabis still being in that gene pool.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, and I was just going to say, I have a cut that was given to me. That's an Oreo. It's a sativa, just regular, regular photo period. And it came really unhealthy. And I set it up on my porch or on my windowsill in my kitchen. And I was like, fuck this thing. It's going to root. I'm going to leave it there for months. And my wife was just like, what is this ugly, nasty thing? 3 months later, it finally popped a little root. And I just, for whatever reason, it was just like one of those like pet plants, the sick plant that I just had on my windowsill. And it literally never grew. It grew this big all summer, and it went outside and back in my house. Now I've got it in a bigger pot and it's growing again, but it's under the 12-12 life cycle. And it's just this big and it still hasn't started to flower.
Which is interesting.
It's just because it's stunted. It's just not, it's just so shocked and so stunted and just like,
it's shocked. So it's like, oh wait, I'm on a clock. Not anymore. I'm not paying attention.
I'm going to bed and I'm not moving until I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm taking my ball home. Like I'm done. Yeah, it's like stop abusing me and give me a little love, But yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how dominant ruderalis is or day neutral is actually in the plant. I think that has a lot to attribute to it. The sensitivities, or even what you two are seeing as far as like transplanting, get a little bit of growth, transplanting, get a little bit of growth. See both sides of it.
So, let me ask you about the stuff that you got right now. Like the one that everyone's really talking about is the CBG gem. Is that's related? I would guess to the purple gem that you got from Mossy.
That's correct.
Tell us how you got from purple gem Mossy's seeds to what you're putting out now.
So initially, I bought them, and the whole reason I bought them is like, if I'm going to do this, I want purple flower. And as you can imagine, after 10 seeds, I didn't get any purple flower, and that's because it's a hard trait to seem to lock in at such an early stage with everything else going on. So, and when I made the seeds off of the F1, the F2 started showing up way more white dominant, a little bit heavier yields, and I noticed a lot of pain relief for myself. I deal with a lot of cerebral pain, migraines, nerve pain from roots, in your teeth and stuff like that. And we all know, like any kind of a pain in your mouth, it's just painful. So I started working them to deal with the pain. And initially I thought it was pure CBD. I figured, okay, this is ruderalis. It's related to closer to hemp than it really is our THC, counterparts. And I thought, well, maybe she's just dominant in CBD. So I've continually worked that strain to improve structure, to improve yield, mainly to provide for medical needs for myself and the next mother-in-law. And got out here to the Northwest and decided to run it on the farm to figure out, what exactly was going on inside there, and then had it tested. And turns out it came harvested at 3% CBG. Which opened my eyes to a whole new world of, what pain relief can really be in a non-psychoactive cannabinoid. So that's, how I basically, for lack of a better term, I stumbled across that magic, man. It just happened to be the direction that I was working. I based the reading off of physical needs as well as attributes coming from the terpene smells, smelling each individual plant. Like literally some of them, and a lot of people make fun of me, will make my mouth water, whereas other ones just, you turn your nose to. You've experienced that. You were going through your gardens out there. There's some of them, like I could just walk by and brush them, and I was, to turn my head. And other ones we really had to get in there to get that terp profile. And that those flavonoids and the cannabinoids that were coming out just spoke to me. And I worked in that direction, and I took it from, I'm not sure what state they were in when I got them through that, distributor that from Mossy, but I took them from beyond that point up into, I've got F9 sitting here at the house now. And the F7s and F8s really show the dominance of the CBG.
What about the other two that you had? How did you get? Did you start with the purple gem from there to get into the anvil, into the alpha?
No, they're not related at all. Actually, alpha number 5 was a umbrella project. I had each alpha number incorporates a different indica into the line. The fifth additive for alpha number 5 was Bubba Kush. I took those to F3, and at F3, I saw 3 distinct phenotypes, completely different male and female pairs across 3 different lines. Of course, there was a bunch of hodgepodge, but I had 6 plants, or 6 that looked completely identical to each other, and I split the lines at F3. Alpha number 5, I kept true to her structural design, flower type, terpenes, and potency. Anvil, I started chasing the color on. So by F6, even the alpha males, or excuse me, the anvil males and the anvil females all show purple. I've pretty much, I think I've seen well over a few thousand seeds that have been out there and grown now, that there hasn't been an individual female that hasn't turned purple or looked the same. Alpha 5 carries the heavy yield. Now there is a third one to that line that hasn't been released yet, but I'm still working on it. I'm not pleased with what I'm seeing as far as like homozygous results. They don't want to maintain similarity across the generations. They're at F5 right now, and there's too much diversity still in the gene pool for me. So they need a little bit more work. But I do have a couple other ones too, like the Bobby's Widow got me my first cup win, first award for that, which was pretty cool. It's a White Widow cross. Now it's kind of related to Alpha 5, but from a different gene pool.
So I want to try to go back. You said so the Alpha 5 was a Bubba Kush cross.
Yes, correct.
The Anvil, is that what you said?
No, actually, Alpha number 5 was Bubba Kush cross Alpha number 4. Alpha number 4 came from Spain. That also was hand delivered to me by Mossy. That wasn't through a seed bank. That was after we met and became friends. And she actually guided me a lot in my earlier years on what to look for, how to look for it, taught me about the symmetry of a plant. Good, meshing genes usually result to balanced plant finger count, as far as like branching. As long as there's symmetry there, it's a good mesh of the genes. So Bubba Kush was crossed with Alpha number 4 to make Alpha number 5.
And so then on that initial cross, are they all autoflowers?
No, I used a it was told to be, it was said to be a pre-98 Bubba cut, but I don't know if I necessarily believe that being where I was at, but I do know it had the Bubba Kush tendencies. I know it was a reputable source, but so that initial cross gave me 75% photo period, 25% of a hodgepodge of mix. And in that 25%, you would find auto, but they're going to be too much like dad, because I used a male to cross to a female Bubba Kush. So what I did initially is so we'll go down that rabbit hole a bit here, because I think that's where you were looking at. Like,
right, that's what take me down it.
Yeah, so typically you introduce a photo on auto, you're going to get a 75-25 split. On that 75-25 split, 75% of it are going to be dominant photo period and sensitive to a 12-12 light schedule. 25% of those are going to show auto, and what I like to call what the people call a semi-auto, where it will get to bud set to where it's got its pom-poms and then just stop and need a light trigger. So the gene's there, but it's not really all the way there. So after you make your selections, you find an ideal mom and an ideal dad from that F1 generation, you inbreed them. And that's going to give you your F2 from that generation. And the math usually plays out 50-50. You're going to get 50% of those that are still going to be sensitive to light, and you get 50% of them that are going to be fully auto, or they're going to be a semi-auto, for lack of a better term, in the gene pool. And I think at that point, what you want to look for is the semi-auto female, and look for either an auto male or semi-auto male at that point, and make your F3. You're still pulling from that same jig pool from the F1s from P1 and P2. So you'll make that F3. Those F3 seeds are going to be the reverse. It's going to be 75% of your auto dominant, 25% of your photosensitive, and your semi-auto. At that point, I would say it's good to find a true auto to cross. So F4, you will see full stabilization on the auto trait, not necessarily looking like mom or necessarily looking like dad, but you're going to have the auto trait locked in by that point of the F4 progeny. So you got to keep.
But you could potentially lock in that mom trait if you were, sifting through a large enough population and necking down. Like this is me and Bam were talking when you popped on. That's what Bam and I were talking about. It was like, I think we used 500 seeds, and then
right.
you neck down. So by the end you're testing 50.
Well, exactly. And that's one thing. And I tell people this all the time. It's a numbers game. You know what I mean? If you've got the ability to open up 1,000 seeds, you're going to find those traits sooner. But then the part of me as a breeder is going to say, yeah, I see those traits sooner. But if I want true diversity and I want a true hybrid, do I want to pull them that soon? You know what I mean? So with the larger numbers, you have the ability of both worlds. You don't have to just necessarily target the autogene or necessarily target what mom looks like. You can find the mom with the autogene that you're looking for. And, increased numbers, definitely helps that assistance out. That way, so at F2, you got a mom that's stalling out and needing 12-12 that looks like mom, that looks like and smells like the original mom, and you find a dad that's kind of carrying that same terp profile, you can introduce them faster. But a lot of people and a lot of the guys in the breeder side of the auto world don't have that ability yet, which just wasn't that opportunity until all the Prohibition started falling, man. A lot of these guys were doing this stuff underground, taking a big risk for a long time, and it was hard to get 400 and 500 seeds out at one time to do proper selection. And I think that's why it's taken us so long to get to this point. I think it would have been a hell of a lot quicker because, like you and I have discussed, there's some tricks to speeding that process up once you get that auto gene rolling. And that's keeping the container size small. We're going to have to charge for this one, man. I'm giving out some of those high level tips, I'm kidding. But, I think that's one of the things that it really comes back to is the numbers game and making sure you're paying attention to what you want. Set the goal of what you want at first. Say, I want mom to look like this with this terp profile. And then you find her within that gene. Don't let the gene pool dictate your direction. They will, what you put in will eventually come out if you put the work into it.
Yeah. It's my interest in like Autoflower is I have this dream that I'm gonna have the highest grade cover crop lawn ever, and I just want I want it to be like daikon radish. Like, I planted cover crop because where I'm at it's a lot of clay, and over the years it's just established a perennial presence, and every year comes back harder, bigger, busting open that clay and turning my clay into loam while giving the gopher something to eat besides my weed.
Right.
And so I see the Autoflower trait as being useful to that, because how have the most successful cover crops that are established on my property maintained through the cycle of multiple chop and drop throughout the season. They're not seeding once a year. They're seeding 3 or 4 times a year.
Exactly.
And so I have about 1.5 acres of production. It's not a huge hemp farm, but for me, one of the greatest aspects of transitioning to hemp is I live in a county which is very draconian with cannabis law. So this is like, wait, I get to play with all the other traits and lovely things about cannabis: structure, mold resistance, photo period, all the great traits that are available to us as breeders, and actually get into that numbers racket, because breeding is a numbers game. And I think that's probably the most liberating aspect of it. Because for me, when was the last time I got to pop 5,000 seeds as I do hunt?
I don't think any of us have.
Yeah. Never? I'm going through, and if I see the slightest signs of weakness from like the cold and the moisture, I'm just axing it. It's like you are disposable, and like I don't say that from a cold-hearted place, because one of the things that I posted some of the crops that we just planted in the ground. It's November. It's middle of November, and I'm just transplanting outside, and so how do I turn this tragedy into triumph? Is that if I get shit weather, cool, like the 5 to 10% that survives, and I can take the seed. That's the future. That's the investment in the future. And it took the sacrifice of those 80 for me to find that trait. So I'm going to dedicate a ½ acre next season out of the seed that I produce this round to that a cover crop status. I'm just going to take a bunch of like the auto crosses that I'm taking seed spreader style, not even like boom, cover a ½ acre with seed and see what comes up.
Yeah, and I think that's a great approach to that too. You know, I mean, you're going to have a field full of pretty much all the genetic expression you're probably going to see with a ½ acre full of seed, especially if you start seed scattering them. And that's when you're really going to start to see and be able to handpick. Okay, yeah, you're not handling cold weather too well. You don't like the water, but man, this guy back here and this chick over here, they're just exploded, along with that sister and that, you know, that brother. Mm-hmm. You know, seeing those numbers, and that's the goal, and that's what I preach to a lot of guys up here is the turn and burn with autos. Whether it's a cover crop, an approach that you're going to, or a bumper crop, or just something that they want to fill in with, you know, you can have those seeds in the ground and then come back up 3 months later, you're doing the same thing. And actually, you don't even have to wait that long. Once they start getting into the flowers as well, start seeding behind them. Because if you're growing in a regenerative area, you're going to cut all that stuff down anyway. And those new seedlings are then going to be able to break that ground using all that behind it and just take off behind them. So, you know, like you said, it's got that same approach of chop, drop, and roll, you know, because then you got those new seeds. You can protect the new seeds from all that chopped fresh material, giving them a nice moist environment to germinate and rock on with. Just creating almost a permanent growth cycle with them. And then some of the moms, you could just let them go because I actually sent a picture to Joshua yesterday or 2 days ago where I let my moms go long enough for my recycled soil. I've got random germs coming up. I got no idea what they are because of all the different moms that I've, you know, grown. Yeah, they will drop them and go, man. Like not even a real true like dry and cure period for the seed. And if I talk too much with my hands, guys, warn me. I apologize about that.
Volunteers are often some of my favorite plants.
I was going to ask you about like male pollen selection or / process more so, like, right? So if I'm opening up a population, the first guys to nut, you know, are the, you know, in typical photo period plants, males pop first, right? So if you're really trying, right, if you're trying to get a real heavy, you know, population of pollen all over the place, you know, indoors people will hold the males back, right?
Right.
To pollinate the females. In auto, how do you deal with that? Like, are you just having to like kind of sacrifice a couple grows, you know, before you start breeding, just to kind of get to know the plants, you know, in terms of like trying to really identify physical traits with smell and other, etc.
Earlier on, yeah. You know, earlier on I had to do a lot of that, but then after staring over top of a style of plant for so long, you start to see like common denominators. It doesn't matter what the, you know, cultivar is or what's been crossed to them. And I don't know if that's because they're not true, you know, hybrids these days because there's just so much inbreeding going on. But I mean, like you were saying, like the males show first every single time, and that's photo period and with autos. So a lot of times what I will do is I'll start what I like a backup row or a secondary row. That way, if I see these first males come up, and I usually do this later in the generations when I've got more stability across the lines, where the male's going to there's a pretty good chance that the next set of males is going to smell and look the same as the mom. Earlier on, it's a separation game. So what I do is I have 2 separate areas that are completely, you know, away from each other and separate. There's no way of cross-contamination unless it's me. You know, if I'm in the, you know, the male room and I'm, you know, collecting pollen from the male, and I make a dumbass move and walk into my female room, well then, yeah, I've screwed the pooch. But like what I like to do is I keep them separated, and I collect the male pollen from the ones that I like, and I put it in glass vials in a cool area, cool and dry being key. And then once I find that, you know, and label everything, this male had this trait, that male had this trait, but this one's the one I really wanted. And then I'll take a selection out of my females who are just now ready to receive that pollen. That way you get those high numbers that you're looking for. So I mean, male preservation is kind of the same way, except for like with photos, you just hold your light cycle. With autos, you have to learn how to catch and store pollen.
Right. I was just going to say I've been growing in beds for so long. I actually fail to recognize that you can grow in pots. And so some of that, I'm like, you know, you're fucked. It's the seeds in the ground. It's there, you know what I mean? Type deal. It's not like what you're talking about. Just plant them in pots and move them in another room, dumbass.
You know?
I need my air horn to do a pull up because that's game right there.
Right. I do that with photo periods for sure. Yeah, I pull up for sure.
Like, the Czech Mongolians, I'm running into that problem right now. It's like those males just started nutting super fast, and then the females who just started developing their calyxes, like they've been seeded, and so the number of seeds that I'm going to get off of those is I got to like either drastically increase the planting density or do what you said. I like that. Start a separate batch so that I can pull the females out of there. I mean, yeah, my solution in the meantime has been to save pollen, but I was thinking about it from like, if I'm trying to produce quantity of seed, how to plan that.
You know, and
So,
just to give you an example, Alf number 5, for instance, I knew that it was ready to go. It was in, the F5, the F4 seed looked great. I knew the S5 seed would have it locked in there a little bit more. I isolated my male very early on, and I found my star female, set her up in the room, set her up, let her get to not right before she swells, to where pretty much her main cola is formed, but they're not swelling to build bulk yet. And then I just hand painted her. And that plant was 3.5 foot tall by 2.5, 3 foot wide. And I got 6,000 seeds off that one female from that isolation like that. You know, and that's what I think, you know, you're looking for is hold them back. Another trick that's a little harder to do, you have to have the right cultivars to do it, but autos can be cloned. And it's not the type of clone that you're used to with photo periods. When you clone them,
What do you mean autos can be cloned?
yes, they can. And I actually talked on a breeder's panel a couple of weeks ago about this. It's got to be the right cultivar. It has to have a decent amount of stretch in it. It has to have a longer veg period. And if you can find those two items, you can clone him.
Can you re-veg? Can you re-veg them?
I've heard guys claiming it, but I call bullshit. I've tried a couple times, like off gen, and I'm not just saying maybe it could have been my environment. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I've had a really hard time trying to do it. Most of the time, you get stem rot before they actually try to,
certain cultivars. Bam could probably speak to this more, but certain cultivars, I think, are harder. You know, more indica dominant are harder to re-veg. And is that correct?
I can't say that's for sure, but that would make a lot of sense because there was one time when we had a Durban cut, you know, like a raw Durban sativa, and the whole plant was harvested, and the mom died at the same time. So the things had been hanging out on the drying line for 2 days, and we were able to like take the clone off of it and re-veg it. So yeah,
off the drying line.
Off the drying line, 2 days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, dude. I called it the resurrection cut.
And, you know, I have a pure Durban running right now. It's still in my greenhouse. It's still going, and I don't think it's going to finish before Christmas because of our climate. But there's something about her, man. I've never seen 100% clone rate like that before. Like just absolute subpar conditions, and they still spit out roots. So I don't doubt that with them. There's something magical about that plant.
I think some of the sativas have that type of a trait. So I'm running Panama Reds right now, and some of them were susceptible to root rot, and so most of them that were susceptible to root rot, I would just cull and toss. And that there was one that I really didn't want to lose. It reminded me a lot of her grandma, who I was in love with, and so I yanked her out and separated her from her root structure, and I tossed that root structure out of the pot, and I put Mama back in the pot and mounted it up and watered it in. And guess what?
She took
rocking.
off.
She's rocking.
Now, the one thing I will say is the Durban that I've got, and I cracked it from seed last year, does not like artificial light. I put it outside. It was the most gorgeous plant in my greenhouse. It doesn't like LED. It's eagle clawing. It's throwing yellow colors. I mean, it's everything that I have thrown at it just doesn't like it. Just doesn't like it at all.
So what I found about like sativas in general is that they're less sensitive to like the shorter light period in terms of like loss to yield. They're not quite as dependent on the long day. And you were saying that like with autoflowers that's the opposite. Now, have you tried mixing in like the Durban with like the autoflowers and trying to capture that lack of light sensitivity to the yield, like the lack of dependence on long days for performance into the autoflower?
I actually have. I've got a Durban auto right now that was pure Durban cross ruderalis that was taken to F2. It got to the pom-pom stage. And then I gave it a kick with some anvil pollen. So it got anvil. It was an F5 generational male to an F2 generational initial cross. And it spiked it over the edge. But I noticed it was in, it didn't need as intense light. It was kind of in the corner of my grow tent at the time because I had a few seeds left of it. I didn't know if they were going to germinate. One female survived. Kind of just neglected it. I thought, well, it's surviving over there in the corner. Might as well pollinate it, and it's getting some of the good, some of my better test reviews so far. It's really starting to show ease of grow, where like anybody they're throwing anything at it, it's kind of just bouncing back from it. So I think some of that kind of stuck through there. So after the feedback I've been getting from it, I think I want to play with it a little bit more. I just sent it out as freebies just to see what it would do. As one of those, well, let's not lose the gene pool crosses, and I think it was a good call.
If you need a tester, I have 5,000 square feet of research.
I will be taking care of you. I've got probably about 3,500 of those. So yeah, I'll help you out a little bit. It's got that licorice terp profile to it too. So yeah, it's stuck around.
Does it have like the anise also?
Does it have what?
The anise?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay.
Yeah, but it definitely showed ease of growth. So I think if you put it under some serious care, and honestly, I'm not really sure what you meant by that too. So
anise is like licorice. I think you guys are talking about the same flavor. Black licorice and anise, anise, they're the same flavor, kind of very, very similar.
Okay. Yeah, see, I'd never heard that term. But yeah, it's like that black Jägermeister is the best way that I could really, just.
Okay. Yeah. And what I was talking about is like, so with like a lot of my indica varieties, I noticed that in the summertime when I get more intense sunlight and longer days, I get a much nicer milk structure. They fill out, they're not fluffy, and they're crystalline. Whereas if I do that same thing in the middle of December, I'm not getting that yield, and it's not the same. But with like the Durban and a bunch of other sativas, I've noticed that the shorter days and the lower light angle doesn't play as much of a factor. If like we're talking about a 50 to 25% factor in a lot of the indica dominant varieties, maybe it's a 5 to 10% factor.
Wow.
In some of the sativas.
Well, and I noticed. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying, just my theory is that it's just based on the angle of the light and the hours of the light, because the greenhouse is climate controlled. So
right.
It has nothing to do with the cold.
Right. It has to do something with that light. And I mean, right now, I mean, my greenhouse isn't temperature controlled. It's not climate controlled at all. It's pretty much a rain barrier with some kind of barrier for bug infestation. You know what I mean? And to control the plant. And I honestly, like, it literally waited till we got to 12:12 here to flower. And then once it finally got to 12:12, it started triggering. But I noticed that once the light hours dropped even more, it started to put it on way faster than some of the indicas that finished early for me. Like once like you were saying, that intense autumn, red spectrum sun, it really finished out my indica dominant cultivars quickly. But that sativa, with her being like that, it was almost seemed like she waited until she didn't need as much hours where she could focus that bug growth on that. Why? I'm not sure, but I could, I saw the same thing. Yeah, I got no idea. It goes against everything I've ever read. So
but oftentimes what you see is more valuable, and I think that's where your experience with the Durban is really, really cool, because if the Ruderals is, you're talking about completely different light, not just light schedule, light schedules,
demands,
and reactions to that light.
Yeah, and
it'd be cool
I know
to
this
cross it within the Reunion Islands of Mall. Have you messed with that one at all, Bam? I know I told you about it, Dan. It's I've got one female. I got given some seeds, and only one seed was able to germinate, and it was a female. And I had to harvest it, and that was that. But apparently, you can keep it going like a blackberry, like an ever-bearing plant, where you can keep harvesting perpetually if it's kept in that 12 light cycle for a couple of years. Sort of, and tomatoes are like that. Tomatoes will go strong for 18 to 24 months.
Indeterminate varieties.
Right.
Yeah, especially if the climate's controlled. I've seen several of those greenhouse grows where they let it vine up, they harvest their tomatoes, take off 3/4 of the plant, and force that vine down and let those vines start back up. And I mean, as long as that light cycle's there, that temperature and climate are right, those tomatoes will just keep going and going and going.
I feel like there's a lot of equatorial strains that are like that. If I look back at like a bunch of like the sativas that I've grown and trying to like wait for them to finish, like they're never going to finish. Like
they're not designed
to harvest the tops. Then when the middles go, the middles will become tops, and there'll be new middles, and you just keep going. I think that's like a
blackberry.
Like tie that up.
Yeah. Guys, I don't mean to be rude. I got to take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Yeah, all good, man.
On that note, I need to take a really quick break too.
Are you guys gonna leave me here by myself? No, I'll pause it. We're good. Wow, those guys are taking a break.
All right, let's do it.
All right, we're back recording. Sorry, we all had to take our man breaks. We're drinking tea and beer and coffee and whatnot. And anyways, I want to
shout out to
Boochcraft. Nice. So I forgot exactly what I was going to ask, but the goal that you and I were, with the project that you and I are working on, Dan, is to breed in some fucking dank cannabis flavors into some Autoflower hemp varieties. And so where we started out with the project is I bought some seed, some OTTO #2, which is a hemp variety, crossed with an AUTO flower. And they were supposed to be stabilized in like something like F8, something really, phenomenal. I paid, too much for them, way too much. And then I was also, in the same order, gifted a bunch of seed, that were a Czech cross Mongolian. And all it said, the guy said, these are super wild, these are gift, this is for your breeding project, but they're all over the place. And then when I got them, it said 5 to 6 weeks from first true leaf. And I'm like, oh shit, that's fast. Okay. Right. And so I gave you those, and then I gave Bam some.
That would be indicative of an auto.
Right. And so the plan was, to start by just opening them up, but the plan was to mix in like some of our favorite flavors, for shits and giggles. We'll just name the top, gelato or dog walker or Skittles or some of these hot, fresh flavors that are just, really out there into a like, right, this is the dorky to someone who's not going to get high, but they're going to smoke Skittles. Holy fuck. What a dumb thing. But that's the goal of the project. And so we opened them up, and you opened them up, Dan, and what did you find? Right?
Yeah, so the first things that I found on them were I don't feel that they were worked to an F8 as far as auto. They were advertised as OTTO2 cross AUTO. So to us, that could have meant just about anything. And from what I saw in that variety is, yes, we did have some males that under 24-hour light decided to go ahead and flower like a true automatic cannabis plant would do so. Now, I am not as familiar as Bam is with the OTTO2, but due to the ones that he opened, said they showed a lot of the parental traits of the Auto 2, which tells me a couple things due to the stall, and the similarity is that they weren't worked as far as what they were presented to you as, meaning that the auto gene Oops, sorry.
You're going fast, and I know I understand it, but for those who don't, so at the same time, BAM's opening up the OTTO #2 crossed with Auto AUTTO, the same ones that we're talking about, but he also has Auto 2 cross Auto 1 stock. Was that what it was?
Yeah, Auto 2 cross Auto 1.
OTTO 1 cross OTTO 2 stock, right? And that's a hemp varietal, right? And their regular photo period. And so BAM's able to look at both the Autoflower stock and the regular Auto, and you're seeing similar morphological traits.
I'm seeing like, yeah, maybe it was worked to an F2 or F3, because there's maybe like out of the 100 seeds or so that I popped, 5 males that are showing. And out of those 5, really, 2 only are like full on nutting, but they're not really nutting. They have like full like sex pods and everything, but the pods almost seem to just fall off without dropping any pollen. It's kind of weird. It's that stall out thing that you were talking about. But the ones that are not auto flowering or showing any signs of sexing yet look a lot like the Auto 2 cross with the Auto 1s. There's so many similarities in their growth and their leaf structure, and they were popped at the same time, and they're grown in the same size pots. So like almost every control is identical amongst the sets. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot more of the Auto OTTO dominance in those, and unlike, and I'm also growing the Auto Pilot, which is another hemp Auto flower variety next to them all. And like those would, if I was doing like an indoor normal cannabis plant, I would say these things look like they're at week 3, while Czech Mongolian looked like the females look like they're in week 1. The males look like they're in week 4, and amongst the Auto 2 Auto varietals, like I said, 5 are showing that characteristic. So F8, if it was worked to an F8, yeah, great job on breathing out
the Auto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and that also makes sense to me, because like the Auto OTTO crosses have really insane cannabinoid ratios, and with the commodification of CBD, the hemp space, a lot of people are just selecting for content, right? And just from the availability of commercially available marker tests and genomic tools that are like turnkey and easy for beaters to access, CBD tends to be one of the easier markers to like find. I'm not aware of anybody who's doing testing or has published what the Autoflower marker is. Do you?
No, I've never seen it.
Is there a way to screen for the Auto Pilot trait?
I mean, I honestly think, there's got to be something in there flagging it. I mean, if it's
There definitely is. It's just a matter of whether it's been published, right?
Exactly. And that's the other thing that I've noticed too, is like, now that they're becoming more commonplace and more talked about, maybe in the hemp world or the THC world, you see a lot more people kind of coming out of the woodwork with them. It's not much, I think for a long time they were considered an embarrassment. I don't know if it's because nobody really wanted to work with them, that there's no data, or somebody's got that data and just hasn't published it. And I know there are a few groups in Oregon that have been running them for a long time, and I'm pretty proud of their auto hemp that they've got too. But even with the size of that, the one thing that I haven't seen is some kind of marker that says this is what's causing this. People got their theories on maturity. I hold my theory on both maturity and root volume. I think it's still a widely debated topic on whether or not you can actually mark that down. And like we were talking, when we all got back there, I think it's also part of an evolutionary thing too. I think a lot of cannabis and I would say a lot of cannabis still has that gene, for lack of a better term, as a recessive marker somewhere. It's got to be holding it.
So, well, now let's give this guy the benefit of the doubt. of ignorance, right? So let's assume he bought these seeds and he just open pollinated, and then decided to sell them as a bread project, right?
Right.
Question mark. Yeah, I guess that's the question.
I think you could see genetic. Yeah, right on.
Right.
I think you could see genetic, and I think you would almost expect to see genetic drift in that situation, because if you're, some of these males may only get, and I mean, I've seen it happen to myself, where you got everything locked down, and there's a sneaky quick male that's laying low in the crop that you don't catch. He's chucking pollen, or vice versa. You got one big male that's just super dominant, and his genetic code and pollinates the field, and well, that selection was made by that breeder because, well, that got the biggest, the fastest. Doesn't necessarily mean it was autoflower because it wasn't watching it, especially if these were field grown. If these weren't being watched in a controlled environment to actually select for true, autoflowering traits, then yeah, I mean, that gene pool can go either way. I mean, I think if I kept doing open pollinations and having, 3 females to 7 females that were purple and green, if I just started, pollinating that whole room and then putting all those seeds into a bin, I think it would have taken me way longer to find that purple on purple trait than I would to find, that purple on purple trait amongst 100 seeds from 1,500 different chemovars in my field just pollinated. You got a half acre of females that have been hit by 1 or 2 different males. You're really not sure what's going to come out. You just don't have, there's no control. You know what I mean? Like without the control, there's no way to stabilize.
Yeah, and if there's several generations with the lack of control, you're just amplifying that drift.
Right, exactly. I mean, who knows what's going to come up? And I mean, benefit of the doubt, they could have been worked at F8.
Right. It's interesting because I think that he told me that he started with the Czech Mongolian, and that's the story I want to believe, is that, like that he gave me his base stock and he gave me what he worked. And that was the cool thing about the transaction. I thought this guy was, I'm not trying to throw this guy under the bus, and that's why I'm not naming his name, but like.
Oh, either way, it doesn't matter. I mean, the guy was working on a proud project, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm stoked to run them. I see a lot of value in them. I just don't see the value in the broad population for an auto-flowering variety, but even to like shorten like the time on the auto.
Right. So
that's a valuable characteristic to me. And so I popped like 100 seeds. I got 5 autoflower seeds. I'm going to put those, if they actually bear pollen sacs that bear any fruit, then I was going to put those onto the autopilots and see what they do, because I actually like the structure of the autopilot.
And that comes down to your selective and control. And I think you're right. I think one of the biggest benefactors, and Bam, I'm not really sure where you're at, but like up here where Joshua and I are at, like quick flower cycles key, bro. You know what I mean? Like
he's in Santa Cruz in like dope ass climate, right?
Okay. Yeah, okay. So I'm a little jealous. You don't understand the woes of a shitty October or September.
Yeah. Not shitty September, but I am in like a weird like California microclimates, and it's like, there's some years where I'm having a banana belt year. Like, it's a banana belt year. It was 80 degrees today.
Right.
And I've been sleeping with my windows open. But then last year, for the first time, we had 8 days where it snowed. Temperatures stayed down in like the 20s and 30s, and during the nights, and we were basically either under the marine layer or in rain for like 2 or 3 months on end. So and what's crazy is that like you go down the hill from me into like San Jose or Santa Cruz, and they weren't experiencing that. So like our area is like, it's not a rainforest, but for like coastal California climate, I live in what is oddly a desert or a rainforest.
Right. Oh no, I completely get it. I mean, it's like Josh is way farther north than I am. And I'm pretty much coastal, actually more towards the sound than anything. And I get a lot of that microclimate here too. You know, one day or for like a month, it'll be dry to the point where I don't even have to cut my grass anymore because it's just not growing, you know, and then all of a sudden it's just wet. And I mean, unfortunately this year, man, we got hit with.
That was this year. It was pretty bad. It was dry and cool all
And then
summer. Nothing
and then
grew, and then just rain.
Rained. It
And
rained.
then frost hard, and then more rain.
Yep. Yeah, and then more rain on top of that rain. And it was terrible. So, I mean, I grow, like I was talking about earlier, I grow peppers and specifically hot peppers. They need a night temperature of a minimum of 60 degrees to continue to reproduce. If they don't get that, they're not going to do it. And I got one harvest off my pepper plants, and that's the first that's ever happened to me, just to give you an idea how terrible our climate was. And so I think that what you were saying about having a quick, you know, variety to where, yeah, it may not be fully autoflower, but it's still going to get big, robust, and then flower quickly. You know, if you can, and I see a lot of your bigger photoperiod breeders, especially your EU guys, search out that trait. You know, they'll do that initial photo to auto cross, get to the F1, get to the F2, and then they stop looking for the auto. They start looking for that quick flower. You know,
that's what I was going to. That was my question. So, you know, can I do the same thing and just to shorten my, you know, my photo period times and get those same flavors? You know, right?
Yeah, and you can.
That's a quicker goal, maybe. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a more attainable goal without having to target, because you're going to do a lot of targeted working with numbers to get a photo into an auto form. But if you're looking for something that's going to be more of a photosensitive cultivar with a faster flower cycle, instead of being like, you know, pinkleberry is a good example of that. I have never seen anything flower that fast at just lab 2.
Pinkleberry?
Yes. You know, I don't know how they did it. I'm not sure how they bred that or what they selected, but that's probably one of the fastest flowering strains I've seen for this region. And, you know, part of that could be potentially because, I mean, I know they've got autos down there too, but, you know, like, I think that's part of the equation to speed that process up, is to find something that, you know, would normally be 8 or 9 week flower. You could turn around into a, you know, 6 to 7 week flower with some auto genetics in it. Just speed it up, give it a little bit of crack or something, you know?
Yep.
Dude,
I don't want to let you. I don't want to let you get away without dropping that gem that you hinted at the beginning of the conversation. You said,
what's that?
You said that you had something to add about doing feminized production with Autoflower.
Oh, yeah. So right now, and thanks for bringing that back up. I appreciate it. That's why I reminded you too, because I know we go off some crazy places. So some cautionary words. I've talked to a few. I've had the pleasure to talk with a few other breeders in the auto game, specifically like Mephisto, face to face, and have these conversations. And it was nice to see that I was not the only one seeing this. So you asked me earlier, you know, when I got my original seeds, if they were regular auto or feminized. And, you know, back then it was all regular. But nobody was really messing with the feminization because nobody figured it out in the auto world. And as things progressed, it became harder and harder to find new cultivars of an autoflower that wasn't feminized. So you have to go down that road and journey. And one of the biggest things that I have found is you take a regular male and you breed it to a feminized female, you're going to see intersex traits on your first and second generation. And I think it's the reintroduction of the male chromosome. I'm not 100% certain why. I haven't got it broke down in the labs yet, but it's the only thing that I have seen that produces that at every single initial cross. And usually they come out in your success, you know, overwater, underwater, light cycle changes up and down, you know, shitty climate, you know, tested for all the
Hermes.
Yes, exactly. It's a stress related, but the problem with it is it's not your standard Herming. Instead of it coming out on the female, it's coming out on the male. The male will look tried and true. He gets up into the point where he's getting clusters and nice sacs, and he starts to open up. And when he starts opening up, he starts throwing pistols too. And I had never seen that before until I had bred against a feminized seed from a regular population. And that was included in stabilization, like F4, F5 for my own stuff, into something new. I wanted to see how they would play. And that's unfortunately what comes out. They don't get stress from light leaks, but they will get stress from light cycle changes. Like if you start at 20 on, 4 off, and drop down to 18.6, you'll be fine. But if you go from 18.6 back up to 24, say to adjust for like temperatures in your room, if they're not stabilized enough and they've got that in their back history, and you can work it out. I've had the ability to work those stressors out, but initially those things will throw what I like to call reverse hermaphrodite on you, where instead of the female flower throwing the male stamen, these are actually full on, pollen sac clusters throwing pistils. So,
I've only seen that characteristic once in what was not an autoflower or a feminized seed. It was in some Maui Wowie crosses, and I had only got 5 seeds, and 3 came up, and they were all female, and one of them wasn't actually a female.
Yeah.
In the shitty cold climate where it was like the root zone was always wet, a lot of environmental stresses, the male produced like a female.
Yeah.
And,
without the reversal spray.
Yeah, without the reversal spray. And,
yeah.
And then under like normal climate conditions, it turned out to be a male, which was awesome because we were able to keep that line alive.
Right.
But, yeah, and I remember like when I was at the Plant Breeding Academy, there was a lecture where they were saying that that's impossible. And I said, I raised my hand. I'm like, yeah, the cannabis breeder in the class has a difference of opinion.
Yeah, let me throw you a little bit of a curveball here. Yeah, absolutely. And like,
so what happened was what was cool is he went back and researched it, and like in modern textbooks, like you don't hear about that kind of a hermy, but
no.
he found it in like an 1860s textbook, and a lot of and based our discussion was like it probably has to do with like the bottlenecking in like commercially available seed, so that trait was bred out.
Yeah.
And lost, right? And so now in traditional ag, you're not going to find that. That statement might be true, but that's one of like the beauties of cannabis, right? We haven't entered that full-on industrialization epoch where a lot of our diversity is going to get lost. I mean, it's not like we haven't lost a ton, but
we've lost it.
We're not where stone fruit is.
Right. Exactly. No, and I agree 100% with you. I think that the reason we don't hear about that is because, like I said just a moment ago, they were able to isolate that and knock that out of the plant. They were able to see, I think that's a design. I mean, one of the things that I do is I stress test everything. And if I see that, I tend to not, actually, I don't breed with it. Like if I got a male, even if he's pollinated and at the very end of his life, I'll take every one of those females that were introduced from him and it's game over. That stuff will go out into the garden and hope for the best, but like that's one of those things I think that can be about. Like, we're probably going to be reaching out to people that are curious about these same things. And I want to caution them from the gate because this was a lot of information I did not have going into this. Several crops later, I find these damning things to where that, okay, this is something you've got to watch out for. These are the things that you've got to be cautious of. And, to answer Josh's question earlier too, yeah, we can bring those flavors in. You just got to find them. Because a lot of the Skittles and stuff are coming from the hot THC side. And it's really, I don't know the difficulty of taking the THC away from something and maintaining the terp profile. Taking something that's 23, 24, even up into 30% THC and trying to get that down into a hemp variety.
So I think that, I haven't seen it firsthand. I'm going to get to see some this week. But I was told that like the Sovereign Fields Kush hemp, which was based on the Bubba, it's not, the reviews are that it's pretty damn close. Is it the Bubba? No. But
the THC has a flavor, right? Like hash, like if you smoke, right? There's like when you're smoking a higher potency flower, you can taste that. I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so I would have to think that if you remove, just like we were saying, if you remove that THC, if you could just like zap that out of whatever, a Bubba Kush, it would taste different. maybe
I
a
think there's
lot similar.
correlations between like cannabinoids and terpene production. Like, you know, like in general, like high CBD varietals tend to be high in myrcene, so they're going to share that profile. But I've also seen CBD flower that's fuego, and like one of the, like the last laugh, it looks and grows like an OG, but smells like some bomb chamomile, you know. And like I thought it was going to be a high THC variety, except it didn't get me high.
Right. And I mean, I think it's 100% possible. I just don't know the process on that, you know, because I've seen those, you know, like for instance, there's a company called Dynafem out of Spain. You know, they've got some medical strains that are high CBD that look like bubba, smell like bubba, and from what I hear, taste like bubba, you know. But I think it comes back to the selective process, just not an avenue that I've had the pleasure of really going on. And that's really why I got interested when Joshua asked me to, you know, start up on this and to start working with this stuff. You know, it's just like, okay, I haven't done it, but let's figure out how. I figured out how to isolate auto. Let's figure out how to isolate this stuff too. And the only way I believe is trial and error. Sure, a lot of people got more money to do it on a much larger scale than I do, but you got to start somewhere.
So me and Josh were actually having this conversation over today, just about like the cost involved in testing. And so I had this idea where I was like, well, what if we like set up like a nonprofit research and development organization, which like farmers and breeders can participate in, and in exchange for donations to funding the research, which would become public source data, unlike the Phylos models.
Right.
All the testing results are made fully public. In exchange for those donations to fund that research, which would be like, and those would be tax write-offs, because this could be legitimately considered a 501(c)(3). It's a public good if we're doing research and development and making that research available to the public, and then the donations. So it almost be like pre-selling the seeds, because in exchange for donations, donors would receive seeds that were produced through the research funding.
Right. Produced based on the model that we set up. Yeah.
Because like, so running some numbers, like let's say you start with like 500 samples, right? And you want to run and do like sex and CBD or CBC marker analysis, right? Let's say it costs $10 to $15 per test. If you do 100, that's like $1,500. Let's say like once you do that screening, you figure out your 25 best females, 25 best males based on all the other traits that like you have on your on your checklist, right? And now with those 25, you already know which ones are the males and females, and you already know their propensity to produce whatever marker it is that you've selected to screen for. Now you get like a cannabinoid profile so that you can isolate what cannabinoids are present and what ratios are there. Those are roughly $50 a test. So now 50 times 50, so that's like 2,500. So for like, let's call it $4,000 total. You've generated a ton of data and greatly like narrowed down
What you're looking for.
blood pressure, and now you're pushing the breeding to a whole new level. And I just thought this would be a really cool way for like those who are so fearful of the big ag industrialization and the Phylos fiascos and all the other controversies that are going on. This is like a positive way of like counteracting those fears and those forces.
Oh, right. And I think that's a point that we should rise up, or that we definitely need to rise up in as a community. You see, like you were saying, with all the other controversies and stuff like that, where we're in for preservation and wanting to better the plant, I think that'd be a good approach as far as like making it public available information, getting the information to the people. That way people understand it better. I mean, the only way to kill a stigma is for better education, right?
Exactly.
You know, I mean,
Let me. So I mean, this
Yeah.
is right in the conversation we're having about how to form the seed co, right, and how we want it to look, and this in my mind is like hand in hand in what we're talking about. And so my question, we kind of talked about this earlier, but I haven't done enough research on that. That machine we talked about earlier, the orange Phototronics, I think it's called. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the orange photonics.
Photonics. What data does that machine pull?
I think it's like a portable liquid chromatography device, and I think you can do like terpene profiles. I think you can do cannabinoid testing, and then they have a hemp compliance module as well. So I think it's like you're getting a pretty wide variety of the testing that's generally available through labs.
And are you able to like test a leaf sample, right? So like
Yep.
to get ratios, right? You know, moving forward. So
Content, right? Frozen content,
right?
I don't know. I don't know what the resolution is exactly, but like from what little I do know is that like it's a lot more accurate than like my CDX or something like that.
Well, what I'm getting at is I like that it's portable and mobile, because with the Seedco, we could raise enough funds to get one of these and fund 3 to 4 breeding projects, mass breeding projects a year. And I mean, I would say 3 to 4 because we only have to move the machine around, you know, we want to get in different climates, right, in different spaces around the states or whatever.
I think we would need,
but we could easily do that 3 to 4, maybe even more, depending on how quick we got with our scheduling once we got everything down. And that's actually a really fucking cool thing, because not only would the data be available, you know, I'm not trying to be a salesman, but I think this is such a cool concept, you know. So if we took a membership and for instance, everybody paid $20, right? And we got a couple thousand people to pay $20. We buy this equipment. We have money to do these the actual grows, you know, pay the person to do the grow and fund the project and test it all. Not only will we put the data out, but then we put the seeds out, you know, and we can even take those seeds. They could be available in 6 different lines, right? You could narrow down a number of things within that, like what you're doing with the Panamas right now. You could narrow down into a handful of lines you're going to go down and put those out into the population.
Right. And outsource those to different people, because
Right.
at the end of the day, like, let's be real, like even if we took the same line off of a generation and you handed it to the 3 of us, like we all have to check Mongolians. We all have the auto 2 times the auto hemps. We're not going to have the same outcomes.
Right.
We're not. So if we can become like the outcome multiplier, then that's the epitome of regeneration to me. And that's like the solution to like a lot of the controversy in my mind, is like creating more outcomes that are out there. Aside from the orange photonics machine, but also need to like get a qPCR so that we could start doing some of the other screening too, like sex screening and then CBC synthase, CBG synthase, THC synthase markers. I think with those 2 pieces of equipment, you could exponentially increase the efficiency of a small population of breeders.
Well, yeah, because you're giving the source. Like that's one of the things Josh and I talked about too, is the ability to test. I mean, fortunately, I got a couple labs around here, but it's not as simple as being like, okay, bam, you and I've got a bunch of stuff ready to go. We've got 15 cultivars a piece. That's going to add up quickly. But we have that piece of equipment amongst the 3 of us. You've got your stuff there, Josh. We bring all ours in. But then you could bounce the test around at different places too to factor in the environmental factors.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. So, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I just get excited. You know, say Bam's doing a project and he's got the machine down there and he's about to run some stuff. All the farmers in his area that are part of the cooperative could send in samples to him within reason.
Right.
And we'd have to figure out, you know,
logistics.
the logistics of it, we couldn't be making a full-time job of him testing other people's stuff. But like, I don't know. I'm just kind of talking through ideas. But
No, that's a good idea. And the other thing too is like, once he's done doing the testing at his location, bring it, say, to my location, and then he brings me some of the stuff he tested there too, because I'm going to present a different external environmental factor to see if his tests are going to check and balance across the board, just like he could bring it up to your place thing. And bam, I cut you off, man. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't cut me off. I was listening to what you were saying. Agree completely. I was just going to say that like it's going to get to at some point in scale where I think maybe we should even, before we start buying our own equipment, because what are we doing? Buying shoestring? It's not it's shoestring budget. Let's be real. Like $15,000 GC. It's not $100,000 GC, right? So there's going to be differences in the limitations and stuff like that. But collective bargaining. I think that if we had a group of breeders that were standing for something like this and we pitched it right, and we found a lab, because there are a lot of labs in this space, and how do they differentiate? Like they can work with us to develop new markers and products they can take to market. That and so we could get our testing cost as a collective of breeders down cheap enough in the beginning where maybe we'd have to evaluate like what the cost of maintenance and the orange photonics is, what are the ingredients or supplies. If we're not paying a large markup because we're generating volume, then it might make more financial sense for us to strike a deal. And I know a couple labs that I think that we could all pitch and say, give us a proposal. Well, what kind of partnership and pricing are you going to levy for this organization? And for them, it becomes like a PR thing. Like, which lab doesn't stand to look good by working with a group of farmers that are running a foundation like this? And then none of us become lab experts. We can continue to be breeders and not deal with the maintenance of upkeep, and then and also like rapidly multiply our capabilities, because then they're already empowered in a position of specialization, and it can become a symbiotic relationship where they're empowering our specialization and we are empowering their specialization. And then it becomes like that's closing the loop right there.
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, you have to show them the benefit at first, and they see that. I mean, as much as horrible as that sounds, once they see the benefit, they're more inclined with the proper proposal to work. And like you said, they really are looking, a lot of people are really looking for guys that are startups and the true farmers that are really into it for what they're in for it for. You know what I mean? Like to back the passion rather than just the function, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's a lot of startup labs out there that are like that too. And so that's a perfect marriage of startup cultures where like it becomes a game of like leapfrog, but like you're each like that launch pad,
Right. Well, yeah, you help each other. I mean, it's a team without it being under the same roof. It's a community and conglomerate to reach a common goal. They just springboard off each other, like you said, build and build and build and build.
Right, because like so look at
Dan Labs.
Look at this product, right? All right, so this right here is you take a piece of leaf. You put it onto one of these squares under here, and then you close it, and then you smash it from this side with like something hard, so that you're pushing the plant matter into that paper. That paper is prepped with like some primers that will lyse the DNA and extract it onto that paper and that card. These cards can be shipped anywhere in the world 100% legally. So across state lines, across international borders, and so if you're doing something like a sex or like a synthase screening or a marker for like a protein or whatever marker you're looking for, all the DNA that you need to do those tests can be transported in something like that.
That's light as a post stamp.
What is the company? What's the company you got that from?
I'm working with Steep Hill
That's Steep Hill.
to do these. Yeah. These cards are not made by Steep Hill, but Steep Hill will process these cards. But
Oh, you buy the cards independently.
any lab that has the awareness of the markers, or if we as an organization do our own research into the markers or fund research into markers, or can use our data to suss out some of those markers, we could outsource running the qPCR. We could do the sciencing, and then we could outsource the lab works. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
Like this is a tool to enable the sciencing. Where we do the sciencing is an option. I like Steep Hill. I just don't want to turn this into an ad. Like I have an ongoing relationship with them, and they've been great to me, and they've empowered my breeding and my research. But I think really what I want to encourage is more collaboration between farmers and scientists. And if you have a lab near you that has that capability, then cool. And then we as a group of farmers can collectively discuss and interview different labs to see who's going to give us, like, we can shop around for our partners, right? It's got to be a good fit,
Right. We need damn labs, dude.
for sure. You know, and this is where I say the partnership comes in. We can find like yeah, it'd be awesome if Steep Hill is about that kind of a collaboration. But if they're not, I think that there's a whole field of players that probably don't have the same capability as Steep Hill, but have people of the same capability. And if we are partners in development, it's not just our development, right? It's who we're partnering with. It's their development, and that co-development is, like, again, that regenerative model.
The cycle.
Yeah, it's the positive feedback loop.
Well,
but yeah, I mean, if you guys want to start with like that, since we're all working on those Czech Mongolians and those auto hemps, maybe if you guys want to pick out some of your favorite plants, we could all do some testing and genetic sharing. And if I have a female that would pair amazing with like your male or vice versa, we can facilitate that type of coordination. And then it'd be also cool because then we have 3 different climates and environments where, you know.
Yeah, all coastal.
Diversifies the selection. Well, not just all coastal, but diversifies the selection and allows us to find what we're looking for faster.
Yeah.
It's a lot faster. It speeds up the, if we're all cracking them around the same time, we all have a gene pool to look from. You got a fast mail van, Josh, you get a quick mail, and I say I got a quick mail. So great, we got 2 quick mails. We just get that, coordinate that pollen delivery, and boom, that whereas he didn't have any mails that didn't show the auto trait, or all of them smell like dog doo-doo, or you know what I mean? Like he just, nothing in his mail selection, or vice versa. Instead of it just being an isolated situation,
it increases our sample size.
Exactly.
Right? Our sample size and our environmental. So, yeah, so I like I said, I have 5 males on the auto hemps, and I'm saving pollen from like the Czech Mongolians because those aren't going to be able to, can't take cuts.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm harvesting pollen from the Auto 2 Cross Auto right now. He didn't get a lot of pollen sacks, but he was truthfully auto. He finished up, and starting to die out underneath 24 hours of light. So he's holding it.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, I don't know. You got a tip for me to how I'm going to get these pollen sacs? They're there. They're just like, they're not nothing.
Well, see, and that's weird too. That's almost behaving in like some plants don't like to reverse. Like they'll show the male pollen sac, and then they go to bust, and when they open up, there's nothing in there. They just don't produce the pollen, and that could be several different things: environment, um, or just bad gene code. Could be a bad luck of the draw on them, man.
Somebody told me that they were actually like looking for that characteristic. The
What,
males
no
that the males that are sterile.
I mean, I could see that if somebody doesn't want to take it.
For a hemp variety, that would save a lot of fucking farmers' asses this year. From what
Well,
I've
yeah,
heard.
well, and not just that too. Well, I mean, people getting their hemp crop seeded and people getting their THC crop seeded, from both sides. I mean, I can see the potential in having a male that pops out that's sterile. But at the same time, if you're working a breeder project, you don't want to find that dust. You're looking for that.
Totally.
It's a double-edged sword.
It's not a trait that I'm looking for. I'm just
Right. Slash, you'd rather have every space filled with producible. Right. You'd rather every space that you planted is a female that's going to produce a yield, rather than having a dud male.
Right, but if you have the dud male in a population of like feminized seed that might have some like Hermy traits, right? Then like you're isolating the potential to seed your crop even when things don't go your way, right?
Right.
It's a Band-Aid for a poor breeding program.
Fix all.
Yeah, but no, I being serious, like I want to be able to use those auto 2 by auto hemp. Even I don't care how many generations went on and whether there was cross contamination or what. There's work that's been put in, and if I can further the work rather than just abandon it, cool.
Right, and that's the thing I think is nice about all three of us and opening them up. We're able to learn a broader spectrum of the traits that these things could potentially do. Okay, I can tell you what to expect now, and I can tell Joshua what to expect now. It's like, this is what I've solved from my experience with autos and seeing these behavioral traits, where you guys have the photo tendencies more so than I do. I mean, it's been a long time since, these are my first photos that I grew outdoor photos. Because most of the time you keep them small. When you're working a breeding program, I'm not looking for trees. But, with knowing you actually having some Auto 2 cross Auto 1 original stock, you've got a reference point that I don't have and Joshua doesn't have, which plays into the collaborative build of this auto hemp project. It's going to take all three to do it quickly and do it right. Got to have the right minds behind it too.
And I can take cuts off of any of those Auto 2, Auto 1s and get those to you, because it's not an Autoflower.
Right. Yeah, they'll survive. They wrap them in a paper towel, they'll be all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice to have a broader spectrum like that. It's nice not to be just alone in my thoughts with it. So it's good.
Yeah, how awesome that's. I would love to see a platform built out just to facilitate this kind of collaboration. Kind of like a Seed Savers type organization, for
exactly.
like a germplasm foundation dedicated to the betterment of our germplasm collectively.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know, guys. That was a pretty awesome show.
Yeah, dude. Shit. You're gonna have to charge for this one.
That's what I said.
Like serious consulting hour. It's like, it's so funny. I was joking about this with Jesse BioVortex today. I was like, dude, like, I was invited to speak on a panel, and I was like, man, I just want to be the moderator. And he's like, why? I was like, because I'm going to treat it like it's a consulting. I'm just going to get up there and ask every single question that I have burning in my brain.
But that's what makes this good, though. That's what makes this really good. That's how you get good content. And to be able to talk on a free-flowing platform like this, I've done a few interviews, and I much prefer a free flow like this than just like some kind of set schedule. I think this is how ideas get created, and we can honestly spread that creativity.
Yeah, well, I've done a couple podcasts, and they're super fun, and but I don't get to go as deep, and because everyone wants to explain everything, which is good, and be as accessible to a larger audience. But I'm finding that, like, at least with putting on the conference, I'm getting in room with so many like-minded people, and we all have similar burning questions, and when we can ask to the mass, I don't know, it's cool. So thank you guys for sharing and like for all, just opening up all, because there's people like that are just going to start their journey, and they're going to watch a video like this, and they're going to be like, their minds are going to be like, wow, and so that's super
my
cool.
mind's like,
so
wow.
Yeah, I know.
You ought to send me a copy of this tonight, because I'm gonna be watching this and like listening, even just in audio. Like I could listen to like the podcast on my drives, because it's so dense with information there, and there's so many. And again, Daniel, thank you so much for being so generous with that information. It's like that to me. That's like real talk. That's a sign of a true OG. Because some people get hoardy with that kind of information. It's like I just came from a conference where somebody was giving a presentation about something, and then people start asking questions, and then the answer is like, that's a trade secret. That's a trade secret. Proprietary information. It's like, dude, like this is supposed to be a meeting of the minds. This is supposed to be an enlightenment. This is supposed to be a sharing. And it's like, the more that, it's like the Olympic torch, except it's like an Olympic torch that like multiplies, because you don't just you're not passing the torch, you're like lighting the other candle, right? And so really, thank you for that. It was really refreshing. This is probably like one of my favorite conversations that I've had in a long time, really. Thank you.
Oh, no, that means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. I just, fundamentally, I believe it's about spreading the knowledge. That's one of the foundations that my grandfather bestowed on me as being a proper gardener, is teaching those who don't know how to. I mean, the one thing, whether it's vegetables or cannabis or whatever, sharing that knowledge is the only way we all get better. And like you said, there's a lot of people, it's like, oh, it's proprietary. I don't want to share you know what? That's fine. Sit up on your pedestal and whatnot. But while you're sitting on your pedestal, I'm going to stay busy with the people and the guys that are like-minded and continue to grow. Because one person can't get control. It's hard to stop a mob. Not creating a mob mentality, but like, we all are in this plan for the love. So why can't we love each other to share that knowledge and grow?
Yeah. So, stinginess is not as contagious as generosity.
No. Hell no. No, never. But thank you. No, I appreciate, and like I told you guys earlier, it's an honor to sit here and have this conversation. The simple fact that you two would invite me to have this conversation with your backgrounds and extensive knowledge. So thank you. Just the same.
Let me get
Josh,
you a little.
Thank you, Josh, for like organizing this.
Yeah, dude. Well, let me just do the little commercial spot. Like, so I started a seed company, seed co-op, that I'm just formulating the idea, and BAM's kind of helping me formulate it, and everybody else, and we actually launched the website. It's regenerativeseeds.com or regenerativeseedco.com. We have a full duplex on there. We're gonna have BAM's work. It's the stuff you're working on now. Literally, the stuff we're talking about right now will be available early spring. And so you gotta check these guys out. Like, they're the folks that I'm inviting in. I'm inviting in because I think they have extremely high ethics and they do extremely cool work. And I'm gonna just be bringing them on, and we're literally developing the concept through these conversations and figuring out how to move forward. And I think that we're definitely gonna have to buy one of those orange fuckers. And figure that out somehow. So
as long as you can put a sticker on it when you get it that says orange fucker, then I'm fine with that.
Tell us the only way that we're buying it, if that's how it's coming branded.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. I'm Dutch Blooms. How do we find you, Dan?
Full Duplex AFN or Mandalorian Genetics on Instagram. You can find all of my work on autoflower.net. And not just my work, but you can see the growth and the maturity of the autoflower probably over the last getting close to 10 years now, just based on that site. So yeah, you can check me out in both places there. I mean, you can watch from my initial first cross all the way up to stuff I got released on the market. If you're looking for my seeds right now, obviously you can get them through the Seed Co. And there's a few other places online that you can grab them up. Reach out to me if you guys got questions. Don't be afraid. If I don't respond quickly, I'll be more than happy to answer basic questions all the way up to stuff if you're learning how to chuck your own pollen.
Dude, by the way, congratulations on all the photos and mentions in the new Jeff Lowenfeld's book. That's super awesome, man. So mad respect to Jeff and to you for that. That's super cool, man. So
I'm still kind of, it's still kind of wild. So I appreciate that. Yeah, that was a huge honor. Jeff is an amazing person. He's got a big heart for this autoflower wave, and we needed somebody like that to kind of champion that. So to be part of that, to get to mention, to have my photos in there, it's pretty amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is the key.
Where do we find you, Bam?
You can find me at Bollywood Bam on Instagram, or We Reap What We Sow on Instagram. That's like my new hemp breeding venture. Bollywood Bam tends to be just like my personal rambling political thought, but you'll see a lot more of my breeding work on We Reap What We Sow.
Dude, by the way, my first business was a lawn mowing business called Reap and Sow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a failure.
Yeah, we reap what we